Yes, welcome to the Vanguard Show on podcast. My name is Malik Ishmael, the host, and today is Sunday, September 15, 2024. And we have a very special guest. It's almost like a deja vu moment for me and James Tracy, but it's definitely an honor to have James Tracy, author, writer, chair of Labor and Community Studies Department of City College of San Francisco, co-author of Hillbilly Nationalist, Urban Race Rebels, and Black Power, interracial solidarity in the 60s and 70s, New Left organizing with co-writer Amy Soni, if I believe I'm saying that correctly. And James also authored and co-wrote a number of books, articles, publications. And again, James, it's a great, definitely an honor to have you back in our deja vu interview. And how you been doing?
It's been pretty good. Just teaching classes and taking a few myself.
Okay, all right, sounds great. It was definitely an honor to meet you when I went down to New Orleans for the, I think it was New Orleans Black Panther Party reunion. Tell me what brought you to New Orleans.
Well, what brought me to New Orleans, of course, was Malik Rahim, chair of the New Orleans chapter of the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense. Malik and I have been friends since about 95 or 96. In fact, he was one of the people who really taught me a lot about just good grassroots organizing and how to go talk to strangers and how to build multiracial coalitions in an intercommunal spirit. So we've stayed friends ever since then. Through most people, if you know of Malik, probably know of his history with Common Ground Collective, with the grassroots Katrina response, which we just remembered last week with the not only with the anniversary of the Katrina tragedy, but the new hurricanes there. So Malik's work and indeed the work of the entire the entire chapter of the New Orleans Panthers is completely relevant to today's questions.
Okay, and I always consider people like yourself and others warrior scholars because of your organizing acumen. And how did you, first of all, tell a little bit about your upbringing and then how you got into pretty much your academic life, and then to transition to these wonderful books that I have purchased. And I definitely want you to talk a little bit about each one and how to get them.
All right. Well, I got into activism fairly early, right? As a high school student living in Vallejo, California. For those who aren't familiar with Vallejo, it's where such great bands like Confunction and E40 came out of. There, just north of San Francisco. So I got involved with activism fairly early, but I got involved with organizing later on. I was a truck driver for a uh, for a thrift store, and my partner and I were observing about how many times we would pick up donations for this thrift store that were the belongings of evicted tenants. So landlords were basically giving up the belongings of the left behind belongings of folks. So we started a group called Eviction Defense Network. That was almost all direct action at the time. Like, if someone was going to put out your grandma, we would go and find that someone's house or business and picket it or
Okay.
do direct actions. But we became a more of an organizing model later on, working in solidarity under the leadership of mostly women in public housing during the Hope Six crisis, where the federal government was just tearing down public housing and rebuilding it with far less units and far less units available to low income people. So we supported their organizing process and learned from them. That's where I worked with Malik, but plenty of other people. So that really was that experience really grounded me.
Absolutely.
They there, and as you organize, you also need to educate, right? And
Absolutely.
think lessons that were orally being passed down to me um, by some of the leaders in public housing that had experience in the Panthers or other organizations or had fought back against urban renewal. I wanted to pass that down, right? So we start doing workshops, and it's hard to it's hard to learn how to talk to a stranger, like knock on that door. And so
Absolutely.
how do we do that? And of course, we didn't invent that. I mean, that's the community and labor organizers have been going on forever, right? As long as there's been communities and labor that have needs. But just trying to figure out ways to do political and skill education in the organizations I was part of. And so that led me to labor and community studies at City College, where I had also taken classes there, but in 2015 had the opportunity to teach a basics of organizing class. So
Hmm.
that in a nutshell is how I got into academia. Wasn't I actually did not think of myself of going into academia, um, when I was 20. It wasn't one of my goals or anything like that. But I
Okay.
do love I do love figuring out ways to promote the people's history,
Mhm.
and share sharing the empowerment with my students, because it's great to teach somebody three chords on a guitar, and then 2 years later they can burn you. They're playing they're, you know you you teach them the Sex Pistols, and all of a sudden they can play Rage Against the Machine.
One of my favorite bands too.
Definitely.
Now, these two books, and especially this one initially, because this is the first one I read. Talk to me a little bit about this book, and pretty much give a little summary of it. It is a tremendous book. Both are tremendous, but definitely talk about this book first.
Well, this book is largely about poor and working class people white people who in the 1960s decided to support Black liberation instead of going in some of the racist options that were very available to them at the
Right.
time.
Okay.
And they took responsibility for organizing their own,
Mhm.
but working in solidarity and direct collaboration with their Black and brown counterparts. So groups like the Young Patriots organization in Chicago, Rising Up Gang also in Chicago, White Lightning in October 4th on the East Coast, and then later on the Patriot Party, which should not be mistaken for the Patriot Party that we have now, no relations of course. And just looking at their looking at their experiments and breaking from white supremacy and challenging it in their community, but also coming up with practical ways of putting their working class based anti-racism into practice. So that's what it's about. I think if we had to rewrite the book,
Mhm.
now, which we won't because
Right.
books take a while to write, I would have done a lot more talking about the first Rainbow Coalition as a totality, and
Mhm.
probably had not focused so much on the white aspect of it.
Mhm.
But at the time, we were really trying to intervene in a conversation that um, was prevalent both in our organizing efforts and just in the larger left, is that the majority of the responsibility for white supremacy in this country is is put on the shoulders of poor people,
Right.
right? The
Mhm.
stereotype of the redneck and all of that. And we obviously, if you look at the demographics of people who vote for Trump, they tend to be lower middle class, right?
Yes. Yes.
People, if we still use the term middle class, which we can cut up
Mhm.
there. So it was, it served the purpose at the time of trying to get people to think about possibilities, right? Different ways of being, but also intervening in the idea that if you're poor and you're white, or you're working class and white, you're just going to be on the other side of things, right? And
Right.
these aren't the only examples, right?
Mhm.
These are the ones that we focus on. There's plenty of other examples. I like to call it the thread of a good example.
Okay. All right. Well said. Well, certainly you mentioned one of my favorite bands, activist bands, I call Rage Against the Machine. Talk about the machine and how it doesn't want people to come together before we transition to No Fascist America, which I definitely want you to give a summary of. But just talk about that machine that's pretty much divides people.
Yeah, I mean, it's we see it, you know, we see it playing out every day, right, in
Right.
various ways. And that machine is a very clever machine, and it's very multifaceted and diffuse, right? Almost like just put into our everyday lives. It's not a linear thing like, oh well, there, there's the enemy right there. Let's go get him, right? I
Right.
mean,
Mhm.
it's it's a multi-layered machine of white supremacy. But I do take, go back to the old Ted Allen construction of whiteness, via the invention of the white race books, as a foundation, not the final word on it. That whiteness is a construct, like is most race, right? We have ethnicities and we have culture, but race was invented in order to, in order to make people of my skin color comfortable with enslaving people of your skin color,
Right.
right?
Mhm.
And then after former slavery is gone, being very comfortable with assuming advantages in this society,
Right.
right? That
Right.
that aren't given to others, and who profits, right? I mean,
Right.
we
Mhm.
would have had national health care by now, right?
Mhm. That's right.
In the United States,
Free education
had
and free healthcare, right?
we educated, we would have had a whole bunch of stuff, like a whole. We
Yeah.
probably would have had all 10 of the things on the Black Panther Party's program done by now, hadn't been for racist tropes around welfare and bootstrapism and
Mhm.
desert, who's deserving and who's not, right?
Right.
And that's that's where and that's the genius of this evil machine, right?
Right.
Is that you know it 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 convinces people that only have a little bit more
Mm.
to go oppose people who only have a little bit less in many ways, and it's multifaceted, right? I'm boiling things down and simplifying it, but basically, like, we live under the system of racial capitalism, and that means that economic exploitation, racial exploitation, and gender exploitation build each other, right?
Okay. Right.
And mutually reinforce each other to the fact where we're all going to be living on a very burning planet,
Mm.
very, very,
That's right. Yeah.
very, very soon if we don't tackle these things, right?
Right. And also, plus, I think with yourself, you're from the Bay Area, correct? Originally, it
Yeah.
seems to be a now valley of certain activism and consciousness. Why is that compared to other parts of the country? New York, and Philly probably have their own traditions. Chicago, obviously, but what makes the Bay Area such a almost like a hornet's nest for activism? For the people.
Well, I think that it's multifaceted. First of all, I want to qualify that by saying
Okay.
that Bay Area is not free of exploitation and oppression, right?
Right. Right.
People do with it with a smile.
Hmm.
What gets done with a billy club or a gun in a different part of the country is going to get done at the planning commission over
Right.
here, right?
Gotcha.
And
Okay.
we still struggle with police brutality.
Right.
We're one of the most expensive, exclusive areas now that
Definitely.
didn't used to be the case. So we're
Mhm.
not like a progressive utopia,
Okay. Right.
but we do have we do rightfully claim the fact that we have just this intergenerational aspect here where people of previous generations of revolutionaries, activists, neighborhood folks really stick around and teach other folks,
Okay.
like,
Right.
and I think that's really beautiful. Like, I can list all the problems of the Bay Area
Mhm.
quite easily, but I'm very proud of that, right? That we have
Okay.
people like, Pam Tao Lee, who was part of the Ewar Quinn, the and Red Guard, sticking around and tutoring 19-year-olds, as they come into consciousness. We got Panthers, we have a Panther Museum.
Right on.
Um,
Mhm.
and I think that's really good. I think that that's largely why we've been able to hold on to a base, even though housing prices have made it really hard for a lot of people to hold on. You know.
Okay. And definitely talk about this book. It was extraordinary. I didn't know about the John Brown organizing aspect or might have been in the Hillbilly Nationalist book. But talk about this book and also about the John Brown organizing apparatus that you did
Yeah,
mention. Yeah,
there's a John Brown Anti-Klan Committee,
that's right.
group of white folks who basically took it upon themselves, took the responsibility of trying to come up with popular mobilizations of it's a resurgent Klan, White Aryan Resistance, the Nazi skinheads, and all like the stinky cornucopia of boneheads that we had running around in the 80s. In fact,
Right.
I first met John Brown Anti-Klan Committee when they were selling newspapers in Vallejo, right?
Mm, okay.
They had their No Fascist USA, Death to the Klan
Mm,
um, newspaper, and the Nazi skinheads in '89 had tried to come to this area between Vallejo and Napa to have a white power concert, right? And so the John Brown Anti-Klan Committee shows up and starts, amongst others, starts doing counter mobilizations to try
okay.
to
Right.
shut down the concert. Um, so in a sense, this is a really personal book for me. It's like always when I was like, okay, what was behind that? So they did a lot of work. They were definitely part of the new communist movement affiliated with that. But I think the important part about this book is that first of all, it immediately dispels the idea that all these problems that we're dealing with right now were invented by Donald Trump and his crew, right?
Right. They were long
Just,
in place.
like you just only have to rewind a little bit, right? Well, of course, we can go back to 500 years on this continent, but we don't have to. We just go back to the 80s for a minute, right? And so I think that's useful.
Mhm.
It's also useful in looking at some of the rhetorical and strategic stuff that the John Brown Anti-Klan Committee put out. They reclaimed when we hear the no cops, no Klan, no fascist USA, those chants, actually they're ones that they reclaimed from a band called MDC. All
Mm,
right.
okay.
They can be called multi-death corporations or millions of dead cops, depending on what year.
Okay. All right.
And ideas around no platforming, about disrupting, racists whenever they tried to organize, using direct action, not relying on the electoral process. Um, these are all things that are, popular now and used in many parts of the anti-fascist movement. So it's good to see where that came from. But what I really take from this from this and talking with all these brave people there was that most of the members of John Brown Anti-Klan Committee were active in the 60s and the 70s. And if you would have asked them in 1969 what 1984 was going to look like, they would say, "Oh, we're going to have socialism," right? Like
Right. Right.
we're going to
Yeah.
have socialism, we're going to have a revolution, things are going to be good by then. And well, in 1984, it looked a lot like 1984 in a very Orwellian sense, with Reagan coming in, right? The Reagan reaction, but still they had to reinvent a lot of, even, reinvent a lot of their old organizing modules and, models and assumptions to try to address the Reagan years.
Right.
And then on the other hand, that, and they did a many had many things that I would consider to be very successful. Some aspects that I thought that were less than successful. But
Mhm.
then you see as the '90s come in, you see a lot of people, tutoring ACT UP and
Mm, yeah.
carrying on, and being involved with the campaigns to defend bilingual education and affirmative action at the ballot box. So
Mhm.
um, they truly kept, and most of the people in John Brown Anti-Klan Committee are still alive and still active, right? So
Okay.
having to revise political campaigning
Mhm.
and movement building, but never losing the spirit and the ethics.
Okay. All right. Right on. And where can people get this book before we go on to the next? Where can they get that?
Well,
And I know you don't like to give shout outs to different multimedia.
yeah, well, like, to me, it's like, first of all, you can get these things on things like Amazon,
Okay,
right?
right.
If you live in an area that does not have that does not have a bookstore, and Amazon is your most convenient way, get
Right.
a book, right?
Okay,
Like,
right,
don't
right.
be so PC that you're not gonna go get it, right? But the but seriously, both City Lights for No Fascist USA and Melville House, you can order directly from their websites. Bookshop.org is much more of a of a better option than Amazon and Barnes and Noble. But walking into your local bookstore and just asking them to order them is the best way. It benefits. Obviously benefits the bookstore, but also benefits the authors, and really helps create a community of readers and writers.
Okay. And also, you had some recent events that, I follow you on social media and definitely want to make sure people be able to get your information to follow you. But you had a recent event. I think it was, I guess, involving a few people, as well as you did a recent interview. Talk about the event you had recently.
Which event are we talking
If
about?
I'm remember correctly, you had an event. It was let's see, what was it? I think it was the book release for is it Art, Rock, and
Oh,
Revolution?
yeah,
Yes.
that's
Yeah.
coming next week if you're
Oh,
in the
next
Bay.
week. Oh, okay. All right. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Talk about that.
So yeah,
Mhm.
my new friend Steve Moriarty wrote a fantastic book about he was in a band called the Gits.
Okay.
That He was the drummer in that band. They were definitely on their way up with a very beautiful mix of kind of feminist, political grunge punk, and their lead singer Mia Zapata was murdered.
Oh,
So
wow. Yeah.
this is his memoir of that experience. It's a wonderful read. It's on Farrow House, just dropped, and he's really has always ever since he was able to articulate that long before this book, has always been someone who was use this as a platform to talk about male violence and the need for men to challenge men to get over that, right, and to
Right.
build a culture where, um, you know, future me as Zapatas don't have anything to worry about,
Mm.
uh, because we men have gotten our act together, right,
Mm.
and don't promote that type of garbage. So, but politics aside, it's just a beautiful book.
Okay.
Um, the I'll be joined. Will be the opening act, the hype people,
Okay.
by Jessica Lawless, who's a fantastic poet and zinester. Has a book coming out next year. But she invented the Home Alive project back in the '90s that was used grassroots self defense for women as a response to this tragedy.
Okay.
And one of my punk rock heroes, Michelle Gonzalez, who wrote the books The Spit Boy Rule,
Hmm.
about being in a feminist hardcore band back in the '90s. So
Okay.
we're gonna party like it's 1996 and have a good time.
Okay, sounds good. And give us the I can read it here because I have the flyer. It says book release reading Art, Rock, and Revolution, the story of Mia Zapta. Is it Zappa?
Zapata.
Zapata, I'm sorry. Mia Zapata and the Gits. And it's on Saturday, September 21st at 4 p.m. at the Thrill House Records store. It's at 3422 Mission Street, San Francisco. And again, I definitely encourage everyone who's in the area, check it out and definitely say hello to my man, James. And hope I know you guys are going to have a good time. There's
Definitely.
also a book called Too Much Too Young that I was peeking out, and I think you did a recent interview. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, too much. I did an interview with Daniel Rachel, who's the author of Too Much Too Young. Fantastic book about the two tone movement that in the UK, about how bands like the Specials, Body Snatchers,
Mm.
Road to Dakar, and even Madness to a lesser extent.
Oh, okay. One of my favorite bands. I like Madness.
Oh yeah,
Our
I,
House was my jam.
oh man. Fantastically fun organization. Selector
Mhm.
really built a model of white and black youth
Mhm.
working together and challenging racism and the white supremacy during the mostly Thatcher years.
Okay.
And so I had the honor of interviewing him for 48 Hills, and it's a fantastic book.
Mm,
It's really big and long, but it goes, he's such a good writer. You can get it done in one or two sittings. They're very inspiring. He also did a fantastic book about the Rock Against Racism movement that, of course, overlaps with the Two Tone there in the UK of oral histories. That's called "When the Walls Come Tumbling Down." Very impressive.
okay. And you were it was what, a month or two. You were in England, right? Correct.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
yeah.
you were that was that related to that event, or it was another event that was going
That's
on?
where I first met Mr. Rachel
Okay.
at an event at the British Library,
Okay.
um, and yeah, he did a panel with the fantastic Rhoda Dakar, who many is lead singer of the Body Snatchers, but also most people in the United States who don't follow this music will probably remember her as the voice in the special song "The Racist Friend." You
Mm,
know,
okay. Oh, okay.
has stayed, continues to churn out fantastic music to this day. She's not one of those nostalgic acts. She's somebody who's very much relevant and putting out fantastic art and music right now. So that's where I first met them. When I was in London, I mean, one of the things that was really gave me a lot of hope was just seeing how when the racist Tommy Robinson tried to, this was right before the race riots that happened, mobilized in London, a racist mobilization. The counter mobilization was big and deep, right?
Okay. Okay.
Like many different sectors of society, much deeper support from the trade union movement than you'd see here in the United States. A lot of people marching with their unions against racism, and so as long as we're living in a world where these demons are still part of us, it's nice to see. It's really nice to see what's possible as far as fighting back. Because I don't think in the end we can debate tactics and strategies
Oh
and
yeah. Mhm.
ideas, but it really comes down to numbers.
Right. Right.
When Charleston happened, um, we saw what happened in Charleston with with the murder and the mayhem that went on. But one thing that's not talked about is just a few weeks later, we talk a little bit this in No Fascist USA. I believe in our preface, the Proud Boys tried to pull that shit off in Boston, and there
Mm,
was a gigantic mobilization that just basically just drowned out the racist, right, and
right.
and created the conditions of safety just through numbers.
Wow. And that really shows really the power of the people. We know that this country at its basis has been very racist and separatists. But, when it gets down to it, people are people, and we unite on the basis of what we have in common and also humanity. Speak to just the need for people to, break down these walls to be able to organize, to make society and the world better.
Yeah, well, I think it's there's no one group, a segment of society that can pull this off on their own, right?
Right.
And that's mathematical, right?
Mhm. Right. Right.
Historically in the United States, and I know a lot of people are going to at me for saying this, is that his historically the catalyst for for nationwide movements has been the catalyst of the Black Freedom movement, whether we're talking about Reconstruction, 1960s, 1930s. And it's not like the Black Freedom movement is the only important voice of part of that,
Right.
but it's hard to see some of these other movements being catalyzed in the same way without that. So
Wonderful.
um, so I think that part of it is paying attention
Mm,
to paying attention to the fightbacks around racial justice, particularly around black freedom, but not exclusively, of course. And but uh, we're at the we're really at a tipping point, right? Both with as
mm,
far as political power, environmental durability, and you might, you know, one might not be perfectly equipped to think in an anti-racist way all the
Mhm.
time, right? Because of the system there. But even out of people's self-interest, like there's no other option besides building up coalitions. So in Hillbillies, we talk about one specific way, right?
Mhm.
The first
Right.
Rainbow Coalition brought together by, um, you know, Fred Hampton,
Mhm.
Bob Lee. One of the things I love about this book is that we actually just talk about Bob Lee and many of the other folks, which is like organize your own, but work in coalition. And Bob Lee is the field secretary for the Chicago Panthers. Told me,
Mhm.
you know, the Rainbow Coalition was just code word for class struggle, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
And everything,
That's right.
but it was a certain type of class struggle that allowed people to bring their racial and cultural identities to the table, and their needs and their demands, or the very specific demands, um, around racism, and colonialism, if we talk about the young lords, and not have those things obliterated by class, because there's two types of class politics, right, in the United States.
Right.
There's the type of class politics that wants to unite people, but also realizes that we're talking about floors and ceilings here. There's the things that we all have in common, and then there is there are oppressions and conditions that are racially and generally distributed in this country, and and they don't ask us to ignore that, right? People can bring those demands, and a true working class movement, a true class movement sees assaults on racial injustice rather as something that needs to be challenged as part of an authentic movement. Then historically we had the class-based movement that keeps asks us to shut our mouths
Right.
on
Right.
racism,
Yeah.
sexism, gender inequality, and because that's all going to be after the revolution stuff, and that's pretty unhealthy,
Yeah.
right?
You're right. Right. That's true.
It just goes against it just goes against actual dynamics in history and that we live in there. I'm very active in my union,
Mhm.
and I always think that, like, if there was a picket line, right,
Mhm.
a union picket line, and the cops came out there and shot four people, right, unions would be like, let's shut this down, right,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
but if a union worker, um, just happens to be assassinated by the police on his or her way home from work, right?
Mhm. Right.
Just driving, you don't get a peep from our
Right.
from
Right.
from our union. So we have to really expand our ideas, because if we don't, we can't build these coalitions,
Oh,
right?
that's
We
definitely
can't
understood. Mhm.
we can't build big if we're constantly telling people to shut up about real things going on in their lives.
Okay. Well, as we conclude, we got about 4 minutes left. How can people, well, first of all, how can people follow you on social media, contact information, and also what future projects do you have? Projects, rather.
Well, I'm on Facebook as JT of the Bay, and
Okay.
Instagram, which are my main ways. I am on Twitter that way, but I really or X, or whatever Elon's calling it this.
Yeah.
But every time I think of that guy, I just think about that old song "Whitey on the Moon." I'm like,
Every time I hear his name, I just want to take a shower. But anyway, go ahead.
yeah, but seriously, that's
Right.
a good way. If you do drop me a line, I'd love to respond and talk, but let me know where, let me know who you are and where you're coming from, and everything. Don't just send me a friend request.
Okay.
There, love to hear from you. I'm working. My biggest project right now is trying to edit a book of interviews
Okay.
with Malik Rahim, that's going to be on Legacy Left AK Press in a short amount of time, and you're in it, of course. You had the first interview,
I was
and
honored, definitely honored.
actually you actually uncovered some stuff about Malik, as well as I know the man that I didn't know about.
Oh, okay. Oh,
And
okay.
his connections with the Garveyite movement and stuff
Mhm.
like that. So I think it's a perfect way of kicking off the book.
Awesome.
and should be out in April, which hopefully that means by May Day, if all goes well, we will have a big book release party with a second line honoring our good friend down there.
I
Down there.
love that. I'll be on the next thing smoking.
Good, good. Yeah, knock on wood. Books are hard to
Yes,
put
sir.
together.
Well, I want to just again thank you, for the interview. It was a pleasure, talking
Yeah,
with you, and look forward to a lot of our, getting back with each other, in terms of just some of the coalitions and
absolutely.
projects that we both have.
Yeah,
Again, go ahead.
call me anytime. It's an honor to be on this great show.
Thank you.
Uh, yeah, I really enjoy listening to the show. So it's an honor to be on it.
Thank you. Well, again, brother, have a great weekend, and I'll talk to you soon.
Right on. Take
All
care.
power to the people.
People.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. All right.